Hi, my name is Lana. Welcome back to my channel. Today I will be doing my most disappointing books of 2020. I gave some of these books 3 stars, or I think there's like one that I gave 4 stars to, but what connects them all is that I had very high hopes and I was disappointed, and perhaps some of these expectations were a little misguided, and that obviously colored my disappointment of these books. So these are not like 10 terrible books that I hated. It's 10 books that did not live up to my personal expectations of them. Number 1 is Malmoth by Sarah Perry. I enjoyed her book, The Essex Serpent, and I remember liking her writing style, and I liked the idea of Malmoth. I like that it's based on a sort of mythological folklore character, and that it's connected to death, and it's going to be all kinds of dark and intriguing, and it wasn't what I expected. It was at times very boring. It was like a tiny bit paranormal, but not really, and I wanted more, and it just did not live up to my expectations. Number 2 is City of Dreaming Books. This book has been recommended to me, well, not to me, but I saw people recommending it on Instagram. I read a graphic novel where a character is recommending this book to another character, and I was like, well, you know, now I want to read this, and I picked up the Russian translation. It's like a fantasy book with made-up characters and world, which is true of any book, but there are no humans there. All the characters are these creatures, animals, I'm not even sure. The main character is a dragon, and it is a book about books. It's about him wanting to be a writer and going to the capital of, you know, writers, and learning all kinds of secrets, and that there are catacombs full of books, and some books are not allowed, and there's like a whole mafia situation with certain books. I appreciate how inventive and creative this book was. The world is unlike anything I've ever read before, and also the author did the illustrations, and they're so fun. I think I'm gonna insert a clip here of my book with the illustrations made by the author, and I just appreciate it a lot, but it was absolutely not the kind of fantasy that I enjoy. I was not having fun, though I appreciate the motif. I like certain characters. It was just not a good time. This is just not a book for me. Then is the Meet Cute Club. This is a 2020 release, and I was sold on the cover. I liked the cover, and I liked that it was about, you know, 2 men meeting in a book club, and I really did not like it. It felt like a debut novel, even though it's not a debut novel, and it was just, the characters didn't feel fleshed out. They also like get together in like the second time they see each other, so there's no tension or anything. I do like that like the main character is obsessed with romance novels, and he basically converts the other guy into being a romance novel, and it's like an ode to the romance genre, which was very nice, but the plot was just not what I wanted. I did not care about these characters. I did not feel any chemistry between them, and honestly, if they didn't end up together, I wouldn't have cared. Number 4, The Bride Test. So many people love this book. I read the first book of the series, The Kiss Quotient. I really enjoyed it. I was right there with everyone hyping it up, and then The Bride Test came out, and I read it, and I didn't know how to feel about it. Like, if I closed my eyes to several elements, it would be a good book, but there were so many parts of it that just felt so too unrealistic. I realized that a lot of like romance novels, they are unrealistic, but this like went a little too far. the whole premise of this woman traveling to Vietnam and meeting the woman that she wants her son to marry, and she like just like sees her and decides that this is the girl. She doesn't really get to know her or know anything about her, and just like gives her money and brings her to America. What the whole like problem was that because her son is autistic, he has trouble connecting with people and going out of his comfort zone to meet women. But no one ever mentions to the girl that he's autistic, and so she has no idea, and she lives with him and is so confused by his behavior. Why wouldn't you tell her? It just doesn't make sense. And also for someone who just like up and left Vietnam and moved to the United States, having never been outside of her own country, she adapted so fast. She did not know English. She learned really fast. She had like almost no cultural shock, and as someone who, you know, I traveled a lot and I live in Europe, it's not culturally like that drastically different from the United States. And when I moved to New York, I like had to adapt a lot, and so her experience just was like, why is this not a bigger part of the book? Anyway, there were too many elements that just kept me away from enjoying the plot and their relationship. My battery is flashing at me, but I'm just gonna keep going. Number 5 is the book Junkie. Now, I got this from a recommendation by Gabby Reese. She adores this book. I think she used it in a list of her all-time favorite romances. And so I was expecting to be swept off my feet, and I wasn't. This is a book with like a friends to lovers scenario of two guys who are in the car racing business hobby. I don't know, I don't remember, it's been a few months. I did enjoy their relationship, and I felt the tension, and I wanted them to be together, and like their plot line I enjoyed. What I did not enjoy at all was toxic masculinity, especially in one of the characters. Several things that he did or that he said or thought were just like, why? There's a scene when he's in a diner with a girl and she orders a cheeseburger or something, and he's thinking like, oh, most girls just eat a salad, but she ordered real food. That's awesome, she's cool. Like, are we not past that already? I think it was to convey that he's sort of like a bad boy and he thinks he's straight, and he's all like very like straight masculine energy. But I feel like there are other ways to do that without diminishing the female gender. Next up is the book Joyful. Now, I picked out this book because I heard the author on the Goop podcast. She talked about this book, she talked about several things that are in this book, and it just sounded so interesting and I wanted to learn more. However, the way sometimes non-fiction books like these are, all the like interesting things that she mentioned on the podcast were like in the first 3 chapters, and then it was just like, she does make interesting points in this book. There are certain things that I did not know before, and I'm so glad I've learned, but overall it just felt like reading a very long magazine article. She does mention some research that was done and like psychology and how we connect to colors and sounds and all of those, which were interesting, but there's not enough scientific data in this book to make it more appealing to me personally. It was more like musics, and I'm like, oh, I went to that house and it was decorated this way and it was so lovely, and here is like the biography of the person who built this house. Like, it's not what I wanted from this book. Next up is Heartberries. I read this for the Canadian Readathon. It's like a memoir type of book by an Indigenous woman, and the reason why I didn't enjoy it is because I just don't enjoy this type of writing, and I wanted to love this book so much. I've heard so many incredible things about it and how powerful it is. It just made me aware of the fact that I don't do well, I don't connect well to sort of like stream of consciousness type of writing with like random poems here and there. I like sort of like a straight narrative line. It's just what I personally enjoy, and I'm actually very glad that I read this book and that now I know that about myself. And it is a powerful story, but because I don't do well with that writing, it just kept me away from actually experiencing all the power of this story. Number 8 is ABC Murders by Agatha Christie. This is the very first Agatha Christie that I've ever read in my entire life, and I read it this year. I am a big fan of Agatha Christie. In my family, we always watch the Hercule Poirot TV show. I think my mom has seen like all of the adaptations ever, and I grew up in that household, and I instinctively just love Agatha Christie. And I decided that this year I want to actually start reading the books. Okay, it's been an hour. Hopefully the battery can take 2 more books. So I was talking about ABC Murders. So one of the reasons why I wanted to start my Agatha Christie journey with ABC Murders is because I'm also planning to read the 8 Perfect Murders, and that book includes the 8 perfect murders from literature, and my plan is to read the 8 books it references and then go into the 8 Perfect Murders book so that I don't get spoiled. So I had like high hopes for this one because it's one of the 8 perfect murders, right? But also people told me that this is not the best Agatha Christie. Still, you know, I tried it, I read it, I was so bored. So as the title suggests, and the premise that you kind of find out if you read the back of the book, is that there's like a serial killer, and he's killing people in alphabetical order. So someone whose name starts with an A, in a town that starts with an A, on a street that starts with an A, and so forth. And as you know, as this is the information that you know before you start the book, and it's so annoying how long it took the people in this book to finally connect the dots and figure out that that's what the serial killer was doing. Just like little things like that. And I also didn't like, the reveal did not feel shocking, and I also did not really appreciate how mental health was used in this book. So this was a disappointment. Next up is a book that 100% I did not like because I had wrong expectations, and that is Withering Heights by Emily Bronte, my first Bronte novel, and I didn't like it. No one told me that this was not a love story. That's what I was expecting, and I was so confused. I'm not going to spoil the book for you, but if you've not read this, do not go into this book expecting a tragic love story. This is not a love story at all. And yeah, I was just confused, and then I was trying to find a resolution, which never came. It's full of terrible characters, not terribly written characters, but just, you know, people that are not good. And so I was expecting a moment to come, like a reckoning, or a moment when they look back on their lives and question the choices they made, and have like learn a lesson from the things that went wrong and the things that they did, but it never happens. Like, the characters are just terrible people from beginning to end, and no one learns a thing. So it was just a weird book, and I do want to give it some time and go back into it knowing not to expect a love story, and see if my opinion of it changes, and I can focus more on what is actually on the page instead of constantly comparing what's happening to what I think should be happening, and looking for the love story between the lines, because it's not there. And the last book of my 10 most disappointing books of 2020 is Bringing Down the Duke. I read this with Rosie and Crystal for a buddy read, and I really didn't like it. First of all, it doesn't feel like a romance story. It's about a young woman who becomes part of the suffragette movement, and she has to turn this duke on the side of the suffragettes, and he is cold and brooding, and he is a big part of why I didn't like this book. You know, like in a classic romance novel with a male protagonist who is, you know, cold and unfeeling, and he's like built like a wall, and then you get to, you know, the soft inside, and you find out that he's super sweet and lovely and so kind. And I was waiting and waiting for the like soft side of him to come out, and it like barely barely showed itself. And also the things in the very beginning of the way we see him that I really disliked about him were not things that were just like, oh, from the outside he looks like this, but actually he is lovely. Like, there are things that he thinks or that he says in the very beginning that made him unlikable, and that is like part of his character. Like, these core characteristics of a character don't change, and he does change his ways because he's in love, which is a trope I don't enjoy. And then, you know, she is this like strong suffragette opinionated woman, but then she isn't in many scenes. It's like she's described as this person, but she acts completely different. And even in the end when they're together, it seems like he's just humoring her and being like, oh, she's so smart. And I didn't like the like lack of conversation around consent. Like, he just stares at her for a long time, and she is pretty sure that he's like into her, and then he sees her stare at him and he's pretty sure that she's into him, and there's like never a conversation about like, are you into this? And which worked out within the context of this novel because these two characters were into each other and were into this. But I don't like to perpetuate this idea that you can, you know, estimate if someone is attracted by you just like how they look at you, and never actually ask for consent, because in real life you can be very wrong about these things, and words are important. And another reason why it made me uncomfortable is because he is a duke and she is poor, and that creates a power disbalance, which to me it's very clear that it was his responsibility as the person who has more power in this relationship. He has the money, he has the title, he has the reputation, he has everything. And being the man in a society where to ruin a woman's reputation was like nothing. You say one word and she is ruined. It was his responsibility to make sure that she was consenting 100% and she knew what she was going into. And there was a scene where he's like overcome with passion and he kisses her in like in a public place, and she stops him and says, you know, you're a rich duke, and if someone sees us, they will be like, oh yeah, he's great with the ladies, but I will be ruined for life. And he's like, but I love you. And it's like, and I found it really hard to get behind his character because he was just not considerate of her at all. I mean, anyway, I can say so many other things about this book that I didn't like, but I'm gonna stop here. So these are the 10 most disappointing books that I read in 2020. I hope you found this interesting. Let me know if you agree with me on any of these, or if you disagree, and we can chat in the comments. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.